Well, let's talk a bit about the timeline of the development of the film. After Nemesis bombed and people weren't going for Star Trek Enterprise, it was clear that there was something of a brain drain at Star Trek HQ. No offense to the people who worked on Enterprise, but much of the writing talent that had made Star Trek in the 90s so great had moved on to other projects outside the studio. And there was a sense, perhaps with the audience and certainly at the studio, that Star Trek was getting long in the tooth as a franchise and new blood was needed. So the studio kicked around a couple of different ideas for a renewal of the franchise, I think in a sort of a last-ditch effort to keep his job. Rick Berman and screenwriter Eric Jendresen wrote a screenplay called Star Trek The Beginning, which would be set in the years between Enterprise and TOS, and it would follow Kirk's ancestor, Tiberius Chase, and it would be set during an Earth-Romulan war, but that did not happen. Reportedly, Jonathan Frakes was interested in a USS Titan series featuring Captain Riker in command, which looks like we're probably going to get here in the future. And Michael Dorn has long lobbied for a Worf project, which we might also get here in the future. I did not know this. I know that he had worked on a lot of other things, but in 2004, J. Michael Straczynski and his partner Bryce Zabel worked on a pitch called Star Trek, and they didn't cage it at all here. They called it Star Trek Reboot the Universe. And their idea was that they would introduce an alternate timeline and focus on a kind of harder sci-fi feel for the show in line with Battlestar Galactica, the reboot, which was on at that time.
Right.
They never officially submitted that pitch because Paramount announced in April 2006 that the new film was in production. The same thing happened to writers Christopher McQuarrie and Robert Meyer Burnett. They drafted a proposal called Star Trek Federation, which would be set in the year 3000 in an age of decline for the Federation, very similar to what we're seeing in Discovery now.
Yeah.
And Bryan Singer was attached to produce and direct that pilot, so maybe that's okay.
Phaser dodge there,
Yeah. In late 2006, plans for a new Star Trek animated web series, which would later be titled Star Trek Final Frontier, were announced. And that would be set in the 26th century and would center around the crew of a new Starship Enterprise in something of a darker future. It's set in the aftermath of a war with the Romulans. So all of these ideas were swirling around, but they had to really get on the stick here because in 2005, Viacom, which owned Paramount Pictures, separated from CBS, meaning that as separate entities, the president of Paramount had to negotiate a deal with Las Moonves to make a Star Trek movie, or the rights would go back to CBS.
Right.
So they turned to J.J. Abrams. Abrams at that point was a longtime writer and TV producer. He had just directed his first feature film for Paramount, Mission Impossible 3, which grossed $400 million worldwide. And of course, he had done Alias and Lost before that. And he was seen as somebody who had a knack for genre, had his finger on the pulse. And he had signed a 5-picture deal with the studio. And he was working with the writing partnership of Orci and Kurtzman, who were also seen as hot commodities. They had been working with Michael Bay. They did The Island. That was their first movie. And they did the first 2 Transformers movies with him. And according to Robert Orci, it was him specifically that Paramount reached out to see if they had any ideas. What do you guys think? Like, how do you want to reboot Trek? And so they began developing a script with J.J. Abrams, who was not initially assigned on to direct. He was only there to produce, but he was encouraged to accept the position of director after reading the script. And both his wife and Steven Spielberg apparently liked the script and encouraged him to do it. Who would you listen to more, your wife or Steven Spielberg?
My wife, because I live with my wife.
That's the right answer.
Certainly would love to have Steven Spielberg's input on all of my projects, but definitely my wife first. So he listened to the right folks, and as I understand it too, Spielberg made some visits to the set while they were filming, and as imagine being those young actors and being in a big deal. It was such a big deal, apparently, that they drove them around in covered golf carts on the set, and they renamed the film Corporate Headquarters in internal memos, and Simon Pegg says he got to read the script, but he only with a security guard in the room or something watching over him to make sure he didn't leak it. So everybody knew it was a big deal, but to have like somebody like Steven Spielberg show up and give you a couple of pointers on how to do the action sequences. I mean, my gosh. So this was a big deal, and Abrams was a huge deal. I mean, he's become an even huger deal now that he's, was handed the keys to the Star Wars movies after this. It was a big deal, and Spielberg was in, and Abrams, I think, said that he was signed on as a producer, like you said, but read the script and thought, oh, I would envy somebody who got to film this as a director, and so I'll do it. And I think he does a really good job of directing it. I think it's well directed. It does have a lot of lens flares in it.
Yeah. It's funny because Abrams has only, for all the power that he wields and all the money that he's made for studios, he's only directed 6 films.
Right.
And they've all been franchise films. I'm not saying that you could just put a monkey on Star Wars and it would make a lot of money, but he's definitely had that support behind him. The most original thing that he's done has been Super 8, which was successful and well rated, but I think a lot of people maybe thought that Steven Spielberg directed it.
Right.
So like I have yet to know what really the style of J.J. Abrams is, other than being kind of Spielberg-esque.
Right.
And in this film, he does a lot of things that I think work in certain contexts, but also are pushed beyond the point of like, we get it. Like, he feels like a nascent director to me. Like, a lot of times he's spinning the camera around and he's doing Dutch angles and the the aughts, like, everybody was doing that, but it just feels like I don't quite know what to do, so I'll do this.
Right. No, I totally get that. Do you know how many lens flares there are in that movie?
No, if you know, please tell me.
I do.
I was going to count them this last time I watched, and I lost count.
No, I thought about doing it, and then I realized I have too many other things that I'd like to do in my life than count the lens flares in Star Trek. But thankfully, for you and me and for everybody who's listening, Dylan Brown of Australia, who goes by the name Blu-ray Addict on YouTube. So I have to give a shout out to where I'm getting my information. Dylan Brown of Australia has counted them for us. And there is a video on YouTube that you can watch where he shows all of them sped up. There are 721 lens flares in this movie.
I didn't keep counting.
There are 163 before the Kelvin sequence is over at the beginning.
Oh my goodness.
163 with the Kelvin and Narada. At the halfway point, there are 310 lens flares. So there's a lot of lens flare. And apparently when the editing company got the film, they called up the production company, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, you guys, you overexposed this. It's got way too many lens flares in it." And they're like, "No, we meant to do that." 721.
I've heard people compliment it, and specifically the idea that you're trying to communicate a large scope cinematically. You've got a lot of money on screen. It's it's a widescreen movie, but you're trying to suggest that there's more in the world. But he does it even like in the bar in the beginning. Like, how big is the bar supposed to be? There's an idea on the internet called Poe's Law, which is like anything. It's like Clark's Law, in that, like, anything that is indistinguishable from parody, like, might as well just be parody. So, like, if you do something to the point, even if it's an artistic choice where we can't tell if you're joking or not, then you might as well just be joking. And that's kind of how it feels.
Yeah, I get it. And there's a certain point where you're like, are you making fun of, like, science fiction movies with all the lens flares and the super the super gleamy set, or do you like this? But no, it's I'm with you on his directorial style. And I actually had a question too. I'm not sure I've seen all of J.J. Abrams' films, but is this the best J.J.
If you've seen Star Trek and you've seen Star Wars, you've seen most of his films.
That's true.
I actually haven't seen Super 8. So
I haven't either.
With my theory about that being like the most pure, expression of him as a director, I can't really speak. But I certainly think that, like, for all their problems, like, the later Star Wars movies look great. Like, Rise of Skywalker has some really great sequences visually. That'd be really hard to complain about. So, I don't think that that's necessarily the problem there. I was fascinated to find that at the time before JJ had accepted the job, Paramount had offered it to Sam Raimi.
Yeah.
And
Boy,
this was right in the middle of between Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 3. So
yeah,
Sam Raimi, was at that point the highest earning director in Hollywood. It makes sense.
yeah.
And he was kind of behaving himself in terms of delivering blockbusters. So I have to wonder how one hand behind his back, Sam Raimi would have presented
Right.
a Star Trek
Well,
film.
we might have gotten something very close to the Multiverse of Madness, which um, if there's a movie that moves at a faster pace than Star Trek, that's one that moves at an even faster clip, to the point where your head is spinning along with the camera a lot of the time. So, yeah, I love Sam Raimi in doses. There's some films of Sam Raimi's that I love more than others. It would be interesting in the same way. There's been a whole lot of talk, and I know you've covered it a lot, and that sort of thing about Quentin Tarantino possibly doing doing a Star Trek movie. Somebody whoever it is, like Raimi or Tarantino, who comes in with a very distinct style as a director. It's going to be an interesting movie in the same way that Taika Waititi's first Thor movie really, I think, is one of the best Marvel movies ever, and it's because it has so much of his imprint on it. And I think that when you can have a film that has so much of a unique perspective, take something that's licensed, take something that's got decades of continuity, and then give it to somebody. I think the best of the Harry Potter movies was the third one, and it feels very different because the director was really allowed to sort of do something that wasn't like a Chris Columbus movie. It wasn't just your usual kind of affair, and make things a little dark, make things a little uglier, that kind of thing. Whatever that personal style is, when Burton did Batman, I mean, for heaven's sakes, that doesn't seem like the right fit. It was a huge deal in 1990, but it didn't, and now we look at it and it's Burton's Batman because it feels so unique to his vision. So I feel like you're right. In many ways, maybe Abrams doesn't have a particular style, and maybe that worked well for this because it didn't override anything else.
He certainly carried the aesthetic to Star Wars that he started employing on Star Trek, I think. Yeah. And what's great about his Star Wars films is that it naturally retains. They know that they can't give up the used future of Star Wars, but he does find a way to get the gleamy lens flares and sort of have that be a part of the universe, but also, Han Solo's got a patched leather jacket, and the Millennium Falcon doesn't work as usual, and kind of blends those styles.
Yeah, I think the scenes in this film that felt particularly like that, like Bones injecting the flu symptoms or whatever into Kirk to get him on the Enterprise, is a silly sequence, and it goes on for a long time and has different stages of it. But it felt like they were willing to go a little bit toward, I don't know, parody, like you say, or just like deliberate comedy in a way that a lot of Trek hadn't. A lot of people love The Trouble with Tribbles, but other people are like, no, it's too comical for Trek, and I'm a big fan of the Tribble episodes, but so it just, I guess, is a matter of personal taste, but those scenes always felt like too much for me in this film. Like, I get it, and that's how you get him on the ship, but then the swelling hands and the slurring mouth and everything. I'm like, those are the times when I feel like it pushes too far into parody, but it feels like those are also the times when they're leaning into, well, they're pushing it farther than Trek. They're trying to take it to a place of just sheer entertainment.
I think every movie after 4 had to be funny, at least a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just in terms of, like, obviously it worked, it was funny, the audience reaction, but also it was the highest grossing, maybe is still the highest grossing of TOS films adjusted for inflation. So after that, every single script was like, well, it's got to be funny in some way. No more of this motion picture. We're just staring at something for 10 minutes. Like, there's got to be jokes and humor in it.
Right.
Well, Abrams cleared the slate of former Star Trek crew and designers when they began production on their show. His frequent collaborator, Scott Chambliss, served as the production designer, and Ryan Church designed the new Enterprise as well as other ships. Longtime Trek design artist John Eaves did serve as a consultant on the film, though, and he designed the shuttlecraft that are seen in the film. And all the original series props were redesigned for the film by prop manager Russell Bobbitt. The idea was to give them a more realistic and less kitschy look, in the words of the filmmakers. And as we mentioned, Paramount partnered with Nokia to design a new, sleeker flip-style communicator. Apparently, they came up with a $50,000 prototype. I don't know if that's what they used for shooting. And I don't know where all the money went. I don't know if it actually called people. But they certainly invested a lot in that. The Narada, the Romulan ship, was designed with the architecture of Antoni Gaudi in mind. Who's an architect. And it was supposed to look, less sleek and more practical. Obviously, it's also supposed to look kind of evil, like
menacing. Right.
If this is like a typical, I don't know if this is a typical Romulan mining ship, and they're all just like, "Hey, Carl, hey, Steve."
I know,
flying
right?
by each other, these huge evil ships. But
it doesn't look much like the, kind of like you'd think it would look more like an oil rig in the North Atlantic.
Does it beep when it backs up? And yeah.
Instead, it's got these tentacle things, and it's supposed to be 5 miles wide. What are you mining? Like, what? Are you just are you consuming planetoids? I don't understand this. And it's got weapons. Why does it have weapons?
A lot. Well, I guess they're like mining torpedoes or something.
I
like
guess
that,
maybe. Maybe. I didn't Abrams direct Armageddon, so maybe he's thinking like you go into space, you nuke asteroids and that sort of thing.
Scariest environment imaginable. My question, and maybe I have a bit of headcanon for this, is shouldn't these guys all be Remans?
Right.
And in fact, wasn't the last movie about a bunch of angry Romulan miners?
Right. And I have a note here, like, didn't they learn their lesson from Nemesis? Like, what?
Yeah.
Why in the world do we have these guys who look like Remans and they're living in the dark? Why does their ship have water on the floor? I don't, like.
Yeah, that seems like a bad decision.
That seems like a really bad design decision. And, it's like that scene in Alien where there's a room with dripping chains. In Alien,
yeah, right.
And I'm like,
you gotta have the dripping chains.
Yeah, I rewatched this recently with my daughter. I'm like, what is this room where there's dripping water? Like, why? This is not a safe environment for a mining ship. But
my kind of depressing headcanon is that as soon as Picard sort of virtually shakes hands with Dina Meyer and she flies back to the Romulan Empire, they're like, okay, everybody, we're killing all the Remans.
Oh,
and they just genocide all the Remans, and they start all over. And of course, without the Remans, actual Romulans have to mine now. And so Nero and his people are part of this like disgruntled subclass who have to take the place of the former slave laborers.
I guess.
And so that's why they're so mad all the time.
I guess maybe. And they get, the tattoos on their heads because they didn't get the head bumps like regular Romulans.
They got to shave their heads.
I know it was just I've read it was a design decision to shave all their heads so that they would look different. So that they would be visually the other, the enemy in the movie. But the one of the weakest parts of this film for me is the whole Romulan thing. The Romulan ship. I think Eric Bana is one. I talked about the cast and how much I love the cast. I think he's a real weak link, honestly, in the cast. I mean, it's not like he has a whole lot to work with. He's kind of a monosyllabic Romulan, miner who's there to. He sounds more like Bane, Spock.
I read that he improvised his character's speech patterns, and I'm like, no.
What? Okay. Really? Yeah.
Just every scene, he's doing something different.
Yeah, in every scene, he's still workshopping it right now, and we first see him sitting on like a throne with a staff, and it's like, what kind of mining ship is this? I understand.
It's a union shop.
I guess I understand that this is post destruction of Romulus, and so they're probably not mining anything anymore. But at what point do they not go? Like, okay, you go back 25 years in the past. Romulus has not been destroyed yet, right?
Yeah.
So you could go with your big ship, and you could say, "Hey guys, everybody on Romulus, we're from the future. And in 25 years, there's going to be a supernova. We need to get everybody out of here right now. We can get everybody off this planet and we can save everybody." Instead, you you just wait around for 25 years to kill Spock? Like, what is that decision?
Yeah, I mean, the deleted scenes, answer
right.
that question, but of course, we don't get to see those where they're apparently captured
by the Klingons, apparently, right? Yeah. Taken to Rurapenthe, and tortured, and then I guess managed to escape just in time to go catch Spock. I don't.
And they destroy 47 Romulan, Klingon warbirds. So this is like this would be the 2350s or 60s. So the Romulan Empire is still sort of cloistered at that point. They could have just driven right up to Romulus and been like, "Okay, I'm the Emperor now."
I know, right? I've got a 5-mile wide ship that apparently is.
Check out my ship.
Yeah, it can take out 47 Klingon, warbirds, and so you could easily take over Romulus. Come on. So it's just very odd, and like if he has some family that he's trying to save, he could save them by getting everybody off of Romulus now.
That's your movie. Yeah.
I know.
He's a mush-mouthed Romulan who's trying to save his young wife.
No, it's not the most exciting story, perhaps, for the movie. But yeah, and it's one of those things where there are a number of bits of this movie that if you stop to ask questions for too long, things start to kind of fall apart. Red Matter, very famously. But so there are a number of things you just gotta suspend your disbelief and go with them. Hitchcock had a term for this. He called them refrigerator questions, and he said, if you're watching one of my films and you stop in the middle of it, you say, I'm not sure about that, and you start to ask questions, he said, then I've failed. He said, if you watch my film, you have a great time, you go home, you open the refrigerator later on to get some milk, get a beer or something, and then you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. He said, I don't care. I don't care about refrigerator questions. I want you to, if you have a refrigerator question in the film, then I have failed. If you have a refrigerator question down the road, he didn't care. And I think that this movie, I think for the casual viewer, most of these are refrigerator questions. I think for Trek fans, though, who we've internalized all this history and all this geography of the universe and everything, I think for us, when we see those, even during the course of watching it, we're like, wait, what now? And that may have pulled a number of true Trek fans out of this film.
Yeah. I certainly had my share of problems as a long-term Trek fan, but it certainly does move at a clip. Right. And it's 2 hours as well. I mean, I'm not saying it shouldn't have been 2 hours, but it doesn't feel like 2 hours. It does just clip right along.
No, it doesn't feel like Star Trek The Motion Picture, which, feels true. Like every minute of it's, 2.5 hours or something.
Yes. Hours would seem like days.
Yes. Yeah. It moves fast.
Yeah, it does. Michael Giacchino provides the score for the film, and he is a longtime collaborator with Abrams, going all the way back to the days of Alias, and certainly a successful and prolific screenwriter and a nascent director. He's trying to get started as a director as well.
Nice.
A friend of mine describes his work on the film as the sad, lonely French horn soaring through space, which I think is accurate, but it is sort of a plaintive and I think memorable theme for the film.
I love the music in this movie, and I even, as I was rewatching it this weekend in preparation for our chat, I made a note. I think that the music is Star Trek movies have a long tradition of really stirring, fantastic music, and you've talked about this in a number of your podcasts about the films with other guests, and I think this one follows in that tradition. And the composer spoke about the immense pressure that he felt coming in and having that history of those scores that are so triumphant and so excellent. And I think he brought a score to Abrams about when the Enterprise is first seen, and just like in the motion picture with Robert Wise sending the composer back, said, no, it needs to be better, bigger, better. Like this is a moment, and both directors give that beautiful time to making love to the ship. Of course, it's more like a 5-minute making love to the ship in the motion picture. And 40, I timed it here. It's 45 seconds though of Kirk and Bones seeing the ship from the outside. And I think the hallmark of any good Star Trek movie is, does the director give us a moment really enjoy the ship from the outside. And he does that here. And the music swells. I really like the music in this film. And I love that in the credits, they immediately blast into the TOS credit music, and but a newly orchestrated version of it. So I think there is a lot of French horn in space kind of stuff in this one, but I think that it's aspirational again, and bombastic when it needs to be.
They love making the ship seem ironically tactile, I think, in this. I mean, it's huge, but they love sticking it amongst other things, be it debris. There's the shot where it rises out of the clouds.
Oh, in these new movies, they love making it come up out of water and clouds.
Yeah, it comes out of water into darkness.
Right.
Yeah, and so they love showing that it's big, but big in relation to things. It isn't just a dot on a screen.
Like being built in Iowa, and we get that Maverick in Top Gun scene of Kirk riding his motorcycle and looking at it. Anything to show the scale of it, the size of it, I think they really enjoy. And then, of course, they deliberately made the Narada especially massive, so that the Kelvin and the Enterprise would look tiny by comparison.
Yeah, it's Luke Skywalker by way of Top Gun.
Right. Yes.
Because it's the scene where a farm boy is looking to the horizon and his destiny. Yes,
right.
Yes.
The twin sons of the Enterprise rising in the distance.
Yes. This film was nominated for a couple of Academy Awards, and it actually won for Best Makeup, being the first Star Trek film to receive an Academy Award.
Yeah, it's a little surprising after all of them that one of them didn't get something like this: makeup, special effects, costuming. Yeah. That at some point one of those didn't pick up a win. So first Academy Award for this film.
I guess I don't really know the history enough of the recipients of makeup in the past. Like, I don't really know what they were looking for. But I think as genre pictures and sci-fi blockbusters have gotten more popular, the focus is definitely on movies like, Marvel movies, DC movies, Star Trek movies. And so that is quite an accomplishment, I think, for them.
Yeah. And this isn't a movie where there's a whole lot of aliens. There are a few aliens sprinkled throughout the film. And I mean, by that, of course, not Vulcans, not Romulans, not the main core, but the random aliens that they then have to later, name or give a planet to. Right. And there weren't a ton. Apparently, the whole scene on the ice planet, where Spock Prime meets Kirk, and they find Scotty, was going to be a desert planet, and they were going to have a scene where they apparently paid somebody to create a whole bunch of different alien looks for them, and they were going to put them all in one scene in a bar on a desert planet. And somebody along the way said, "Hey, you know what? I think I've seen this before in a little movie called Star Wars." And they realized that they were just reproducing the cantina scene all over again. And they decided they would scrap. So, Delta Vega, I think in the TV show, is a desert planet. And it's established ahead of time in the canon as a desert planet, but they changed it to an ice planet to try and get away from Tatooine. And then they told the people they were making the aliens, they said, "We still want all of them, but we're going to just sprinkle them throughout the film." And so they put, they put them in the bar, or they put them, in Starfleet Academy and that sort of thing. Maybe that's where the makeup award comes from, but it seems like a movie that, unlike Beyond, maybe, where they had a very different alien race with makeup and that sort of thing. It seems like an odd one to win that award, because it's not the thing I think of when I think of Star Trek 2009.
Well, Zoe Saldana's cheekbones were on point. So.
They were on point. She is luminescent in this movie. Yes. I got to tell you, when she bounces up to the bar in the first scene, I'm just like, "Hello, Zoe, you are beautiful." And she's so full of life. And it's so great to see that Uhura character given a little bit more depth than the films and the movie and the TV show gave her. The books always tried to do that, but we never really got to that in on screen time. And again, it's not like they give her the same background treatment that they do for Kirk or Spock here in this film, for sure. But she's just more than a person who swivels around in the chair and says, communication coming in from Starfleet Command. And I think she's great in this film.
And it's become a link in a chain that is now being forged every time they recast one of these characters, to Celia Rose Gooding's portrayal of Uhura in Strange New Worlds.
Right.
So,
right.
I read that, you said that Spielberg visited the set, but I think the set of the film became something of a destination for a lot of people to sort of come and check out what was going on. And Nichelle Nichols did at one point come and talk to Saldana and talk about the character and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So,
and there had been talk about putting her into the film as Uhura's grandmother, apparently. But that conversation happened too late in the process, and there was a writer's strike, and they were unable to write the scenes that they would have wanted to put in there. I'm not really sure where it would have fit, to be honest. I mean, it would have felt absolutely shoehorned in. Whereas just like the proposed idea to get Shatner in there as a hologram, message that Spock would show at the end to the new Spock. I'm glad that didn't happen. The Spock, the Nimoy part, the Spock Prime part, is I think pretty perfect for the film, and it's a great way to use one of the older characters to legitimize this new crew without making it about the older crew. And if you had Shatner in there at all, it has to become about, well, didn't he die in Generations? What's up with him now? Yeah. Don't tell me the whole Shatnerverse is a real thing out there. So
Shatnerverse.
Yeah, aren't those the books where they brought him back to life?
When do we get to Tech War? His own.
Or Trek War, right? The Tech War stuff, right. So no, I thought it was just the right amount of connection to the old, to again legitimize it and say, look, it's got Nimoy's stamp of approval. Then you guys better like it.
Yeah, I think that was always key, and that was always written into the script on the part of the filmmakers needing him to be in it, and he was happy to do it. I saw an interview where he talked about how it had been he'd revived the character after 18 years, and it had been 42 years since he had originated the role.
Yeah.
So just thinking about that and thinking about those span of years, and still this franchise still existing and still pleasing audiences is something interesting to see. He and Michelle Barrett were the only two original cast members to be in the film. Of course, she was the voice of the computer.
Right.
And she passed away before the release of the film in December of 2008. So this is her last Star Trek appearance.
And I think they were going to dedicate the film to Gene Roddenberry's memory anyway, and I think they included her in that because she had just passed away. So I mean, it was a nice. That was also a nice connection to, of course, decades of Trek with her voice and her characters that she has played. So, that was a nice touch as well.
There's, I mean, we don't have to go through the story of how every cast member was brought into the role. Although it suffice it to say that I think Spock was cast first. They had found when Zachary Quinto read, they thought, no, this guy's great. He's our guy. And apparently he worked out at the same gym as Chris Pine. Chris Pine was the last guy to be cast, but he heard from Zachary about this role, and so he went in and read for it. Apparently his first reading, not too good, but he was able to get with the producers and do a better audition, and they wanted to cast him. Bruce Greenwood was cast. I was surprised to learn, but then it immediately made sense because of his work in 13 Days, where he plays JFK. So if you've ever thought of or ever heard about Captain Kirk being JFK in space, then that's literally what we've got here. Yeah. And of course, Chris Hemsworth, the future Thor, plays George Kirk in the film. Very early role for him.
Yeah, he's so tiny.
Anything for him. Yeah, he's just a little. He's so tiny.
He's so tiny.
Although I was blown away to hear that the role was initially offered to Mark Wahlberg.
I know. Just that's another person who I can't see as anybody but Mark Wahlberg, right? So that's the same kind of Tyler Perry kind of situation where I feel like you see that person and they don't seem to be the character they're playing. They are themselves, and I think that would have really pulled us out of that moment. There was some conversation too, I think, about the Kirk character being James T. Kirk being Matt Damon. At first, before Chris Pine was cast. And I know Adrian Brody really lobbied hard to get the Spock role. But I think Heroes was on still then, and he was a pretty well-known star from the TV show Heroes. I may be wrong about if it was already off the air or if it was still on then, but
it was around that time.
Around that time. And apparently the number of people who wanted to be in this kind of came out of the woodwork, and they reached out to a number of different people. I think that they Carl Urban had become a fan of Trek by rewatching the show with his kids and like the original series. And when he heard that they were rebooting it, put his name in for Bones because he loved that role so much. But then apparently Simon Pegg got an email. Like Abrams was like, how about we do Simon Pegg for Scotty? And he got an email saying, do you want to be Scotty? And he's like, hell yes, I want to be Scotty.
Sometimes you can do it like that. Sure.
Right. The funny thing, of course, about Simon Pegg being cast is that in Spaced, in his movie Spaced, he actually makes a joke about how all the odd numbered Star Treks are terrible. And and that he get cast in an odd number Star Trek. And he later said, I think, like it was his just desserts to say that in a movie and then get cast in an odd numbered Star Trek movie. But
later have to write an odd numbered Star Trek movie.
Right. Because he wrote Beyond, didn't he?
Yeah, that's
right.
I don't know if it was an interview or what it was, but I saw a quote from Mark Wahlberg about his involvement or potential involvement, and he said, I tried to read the script, but I didn't understand the words or dialogue or anything. I said, I can't do this. I think you're really talented, but I couldn't do it. And then I saw the movie and I was like, holy shit, he did a great job. So, I don't want to rule out him appearing in the future in some form.
In the Tarantino version.
Yeah, sure. But maybe not George Kirk, though. Yeah.
No, apparently they are talking to Hemsworth about coming back for a fourth movie. As the
God
dad,
knows if this is ever going to happen.
Yeah, I hear all these rumors and things, and it's all interesting, but I agree with you. I kind of feel like we maybe have seen the last of the Star Trek movies from this crew. Do you feel that way?
Yeah. Well, these days, it's not like the old days, right? It's not like Shatner would always talk about how. And I mean, Shatner's doing something right. He's in his 90s and he has looked the same for the last 40 years. Yeah. But like, you do a role and then you have off time and you go off and you get wasted and drive your motorbike or whatever. And then they call you up and you go back on the cabbage soup diet and you work out, you put the girdle on, you get in there. It's just not the same anymore. Like it's been almost 15 years since this movie, and Chris Pine looks the same. He's a little sharper edged than he was.
A little longer hair now, but that can be true.
Yeah, his longer hair. Yeah, but people just look the same. So you could say that this has been, a longer mission for them, and we're seeing them older. That's kind of what they were doing in Beyond. Maybe they want to pursue that, or you could just pick up exactly where they left
say
off.
It's the next people. Yeah, next month.
Sleep in hyperbaric chambers. Yeah, they all look great. So
Zoe Saldana could step right back into that role. Quinto, I mean, they all of them could just walk right back into those characters. So I wonder if the enthusiasm for this version of Trek, they've all gone on to do other things. I mean, a lot of them were already stars, but Chris Pine is famously in movies at Cannes Film Festival right now, making rolling his eyes at things. And Zoe Saldana is gone on to be Gamora in the Marvel universe, in addition to other roles, of course. Carl Urban is in The Boys and killing it there. So, and Simon Pegg always had his own thing going. John Cho has been in lots of other stuff and was already a well-known name, I think, before coming into the Star Trek movies. So the core cast they've got other stuff they're doing. And I wonder if like getting the band back together, I guess you throw enough money at them and they'll all do it. But
Sure.
they're all doing stuff.
Yeah, and when they're interviewed, they always say that they would love to do it. I mean, I guess I don't know what the point of saying like, no, there's
that you
no
don't
way.
want to, right?
But they all seem game. So, ironically, the merger, it's the split of Viacom and CBS that kind of gave us these films, and the merger back together of Paramount and CBS might be what keeps us from getting another one of these films.
I get you. Yeah.
I just don't know if it's on the front burner for them. And presumably it would be a Secret Hideout, Alex Kurtzman's company, in place of Bad Robot, or Bad Robot might be involved. If they did go forward, I don't love this film. I'd like to talk about some of the reasons why I don't like this film.
So we totally, let's
all that
get into
much
it in a minute.
Before we wrap up.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think considered as a trilogy, I do think that these films are a lot of fun, and I would definitely love to see a Star Trek 4. But at this point, I would be willing to also agree that maybe we just move on. Discovery is, at 5 seasons now, and if it's an established and popular property, I think that you start to look towards turning that into something.
Right.
They seem to want to do this nostalgia tour for the stars of Picard and TNG, and maybe this is going to be their last swan song, but Jerry Ryan seems game to do stuff. We can take piecemeal some of these characters people like and layer them in with new characters to make some kind of new story. I don't see why. I would be working on this if I was them. Sure, Paramount Plus subscriptions bring you money. Crest ads in between the commercials bring you money.
Right.
But like, don't you want like $600 million? Like that's going to build your own studio, right?
Yeah, and those tentpole movies are what bring a lot more people into your streaming service to see. The Marvel built their universe on the tentpole movies, and then were able to put TV shows or small runs of 6 episodes to 10 episodes of different characters on Disney Plus. And would all of those, would WandaVision and Loki and all those have brought us in, or did we love those characters from the films and then want to go and see their further adventures? And I think it's that way. And I think that even though Star Trek Discovery is doing well, put those characters on a movie screen, make a big budget movie out of it, and you're going to bring more people into that tent. So So I'm with you. It's the same way that it felt like at the end of the TOS movies, where it felt like we were really kind of trotting the old crew out, and just kind of hitting all the beats, where you had TNG on television and it felt so fresh and so new and so different compared to TOS. And that's when you started to see like, well, let's do Generations where we transition, and then let's go all in on the TNG movies. And maybe, like you say, maybe we're ready to transition to the TV properties again and bring those to the big screen.
Well, I'm hopeful to see what moves they make. I mean, they've certainly made some big and some very savvy moves on the TV side, and so I hope that can translate to the film side.
Yeah.
Although, I don't know, Alex Kurtzman plus movie hasn't been very successful of late, although certainly was successful early on in the career. So we'll see if he can bring it back. I don't want to be the ghost at the feast or the ghost army in the war, but I do. My opinion of this film has whipsawed wildly over the years. And I think we've actually covered the film on the show before for our 2019 live show. And I think I came down on the side of positive, not my favorite. But I realize that it is, doing its best and presenting some interesting things. It's certainly an attractive film. But watching this last time, I'm not sure if it is the lack of a Star Trek 4 from this universe or the continued development and existence of Star Trek on TV, but I really see this more as an oxbow, more and more in the Star Trek universe, something that I'm not sure that we can build on. And the reason is I don't really know like what this film is about. I know that when they sat down to make it, their impression was that Star Trek had become less and less relatable. And maybe that's true. I don't know how to relate to Tom Hardy, in a Dr. Evil costume. Uh, and so they wanted this to be like rock and roll. And like, I'm fine with rock and there was rock and roll in First Contact,
Right.
Steppenwolf. I'm fine with that aesthetic, but I don't really know like what I'm supposed to get out of this movie. Like for me, Star Trek movies have always been about the underlying allegory and how it applies to us more than any aliens or technology or lens flares.
Right.
And it's certainly a story about a hero. It's a story about a hero who overcomes his feelings of inadequacy and the loss of his father and tragedy, and he learns to be James Kirk. But I don't know what the lesson that he learns is. The lesson is never submit to authority,
Right.
or the lesson is to embrace his destiny. And if you want to follow the map of Star Wars, which ironically, J.J. Abrams loved Star Wars, he made some Star Trek, then he went and made some Star Wars,
right,
and basically took everything that he learned and a lot of the aesthetic from the Star Trek movies and then just made that into Star Wars.
Right.
Even in Star Wars, Luke learns, certainly over the course of the entire trilogy, if not necessarily in the first movie, that he is part of a larger world and that it is not, he can't do it all by himself, and he's not, some kind of messiah that's going to fix everything.
Right.
And he needs to slow down and listen to other people. And Jim Kirk wins in this film by getting his superior officer
just pushing
section 8'd.
Yeah.
And even the story, the lesson of the Kobayashi Maru, which Spock rightly points out, is that you will experience fear.
You have to learn to lose.
Failure.
Yeah.
But you have to learn to continue to do your job anyway. And then there's a regulation in Starfleet that if you feel emotionally compromised, you should immediately quit your position, which is what happens. So I'm not sure that they, you can, and it is an alternate universe. You can argue this is a different take on the character, but I'm not sure that they really get the character of Kirk, that they really get the character of Spock. And as the movies go on, it isn't until maybe the parts of the third movie that you see a Kirk that's more recognizable. He's not the walking stack of books that we have heard attended the academy. It might be because George Kirk wasn't there to guide him, but I don't get ultimately what the series is trying to say. And I guess it's fine if it's not saying anything, but it would be pretty much the only Star Trek property that isn't trying to say something.
Right. No, I agree with you on all that. And as I was watching it and thinking about what it is, this one single film, I began to think that it really should have been a standalone, that it should not have been the first film of a new run with the new characters. Of course, they were going to do that because it's just money. They're printing money. So, of course, they're going to do that. But what this felt like was sort of a one-off movie where you say, remember that thing that was on for like 3 years and everybody thought it was awesome, like, in retrospect, and we're going to do the reboot movie that we're going to do like a reboot that pulls all of that fun stuff that you remember into one, and we can all have a good laugh and smile, and then we're going to be done. Right? Like, to me, that's what this movie felt like. Obviously, they intended it to be the first of many movies to make money off of, and their own little, new reboot universe. But I mean, maybe
not Abrams specifically, though, because he was sort of on and off to direct the second one for a while, and then he actually didn't, direct the third one. So it's this, and the same is true of Star Trek or Star Wars. Like, he sort of launched it, and then was like, okay, now you do this for me. But then he seems to he keeps getting pulled back into these franchises.
Right. He just can't keep his hands off. But to me, like, they hit all of the references and notes. We get all the classics: the sets phasers on stun, damn it, man, I'm a doctor, not a physicist, green-blooded hobgoblin, pointy-eared bastard. Are you out of your Vulcan mind? Do you think that this is the beginning of the sort of trend of references as content that we see so much? Oh yeah.
These days, like, it's really embraced now in the new Trek series. The idea that, like, just remember this is kind of That's kind of what's on offer here.
There's a criticism of the new Harry Potter films, which I haven't watched. But there's a criticism of the new Grindelwald stuff. That plot points aren't plot points; they are character reveals. Look, it's McGonagall as a young woman.
It's that
dun,
guy.
Dun, dun. And it's not a plot point so much as
it's normal eye Moody.
Look, it's a person And
Yeah.
I think that's a very modern thing. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, we get Chekhov butchering his W's. We get the I don't believe in no-win scenarios. We even get a like a gag when Kirk is running. He's on Hoth, and he's trying to give the star date, and he's like, star date, I don't know, whatever. And it's like, yeah, because they never cared in the old show, right?
Yeah.
I thought that was a funny gag. I'm giving her all she's got. Live long and prosper. I have been and always shall be your friend. The Vulcan nerve pinch, the Kobayashi Maru, the red alerts. They even eject the damn warp core at the end. Like, if you listed like all the tropes, to a word you like, if you took all the tropes from Star Trek and you crammed them into one movie, this is what you'd get. Like, this is it. It has every single beat in it. And so when you think about where do you go from here, there's nowhere to go from here, because you've done, I think the whole reason this exists, and you're right, it doesn't mean anything. The whole reason it exists is a nostalgia replay. It's the remix song. And you're right, it suffers for that. And I've read that they thought a lot about Lennon and McCartney in terms of Kirk and Spock. That they went into this thinking that what they were doing is telling the story of how two different people who are very different from each other come together into something that's much better than the sum of their parts.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And so that's why we get Kirk and Spock as younger people. There were even more scenes than that. I think they cut from the film, that they wanted to give us more of Kirk and Spock as young people. That's why we get that character development. I'm not sure that they successfully build that friendship here, like you say, that maybe it takes 2 or 3 movies to get to that point. But I think that instead of trying to say something about the human experience, they were trying to tell us something about how these two people who've told us something about the human experience for dozens of movies and seasons of TV shows came together. You know, it's like an origin story.
It's literally. That's an interesting idea that like maybe just this one and then something else for another film. I think they took this same formula and evolved it probably, in my opinion, to more excess in the Star Wars films, when in The Force Awakens, you know, the young heroes of the film are basically Star Wars fans. You know, they know the legends. They're like, just use the Force on it, you know, do the thing.
Yeah, do the thing.
Or like Ghostbusters Afterlife, the idea of like having new heroes, but having the old heroes mentor them. And so, I don't know, maybe like a Star Trek 4 could be a jumping off point to a new series of films by having the mentorship of the older characters or some kind of connection there.
Right.
But just as a standalone thing, like you liked them this way, now they're this way.
Right.
You're going to get some people with that, but other people are going to be like, well, I like them because they were that one way.
Right. I think as an entertaining summer blockbuster popcorn movie, it hits. And I think it's great for that. I think you're right, though. I think as setting up any kind of a larger comment about the human condition or about the world that all of the other TV shows and movies try to do, whether they're successful or not, is a real drawback here. It means there's, again, not much when you look beneath the surface. And I think honestly, that's the case with a lot of Abrams stuff, like Lost and Alias. Like those were shows that completely were predicated on the idea of introducing new wild elements and constantly building the mystery without ever really knowing what they were trying to say about any of it.
Yeah, being just the culture of remix, right? Like having something that is referential or is sort of an allusion to something, but like, what are you trying to say? And I'm not accusing like the writers of this movie or the writers of Lost of having nothing to say, but I'm real up and down on more down than up on Damon Lindelof as a creator. I feel like he is someone like me who is steeped in all of this and maybe steeped to the level of toxicity where it's impossible to really create something original because I'm always thinking about that other movie. And I think that he works really hard on some things, like The Leftovers, like Watchmen, like you can tell that he's really applying himself. And
Right.
then there's things like Alien Covenant, where he's like, or not Covenant, the first one, right? Prometheus, where
Right.
he's
Oh
like,
yeah.
yeah, aliens, they put the thing in the thing and you get an alien. That's how it works.
Yeah. Yeah. I listen, as a fan of pop culture, as somebody who consumes it in many different ways, and then as a person who tries to create my own stuff, this is a real challenge because you internalize so many of those other things, the way that characters say things, the way that the way that a writer might introduce a scene. I remember in one of my early novels, I had somebody showing somebody else a baseball bat. That it was back in the 1800s, so it was a very early baseball bat that their family had. Somebody had made this baseball bat. They didn't buy it in the store, and somebody hefts it and says, "Oh, I've never seen its like." And I realized as I was writing it that I was writing a Princess Bride line. That was I guess the Dread Pirate Roberts holding Inigo Montoya's sword and saying, "Oh my gosh, that's a great sword," and
Right.
and I was like, "Oh, I can't use that. Like I can't say
Yeah.
that. That's not my line." And I don't even want to make that reference here because making that reference here makes no sense. Like,
Yeah.
that's just me as a fan putting another element in that's just cooked into me, that's baked into me. And I think that you have to really resist that as a creator. It's very hard. It's really hard. And there, especially when you're given a property and told remix this thing that already exists. And so I think to their credit, they did not throw out everything Trek to reboot it. They did clear house. They got rid of a lot of the producers and writers. They got rid of a lot of the people who designed sets. They maybe kept one person, like you said, who did shipbuilding for them. They brought in a whole new costume designer who'd never worked on Trek before and said, "What can you do with these primary colored costumes that J.J. Abrams hates so much?" And but at the same time, the writers were reading college dissertations about Kirk and Spock, and they were reading the novels and trying to pull the character background about Neoda, who gets a first name for the first time. Uhura gets a first name on screen for the first time in any Star Trek canon property, anything on big screen or little. They were trying to they pulled from like Yesteryear, the animated series background of Spock, again, very lightly. None of this is pulled in and used in great detail. But I feel like one of the things that they did right, at least by the fans, was they said, "We understand there's this huge continuity out there and we're going to pull in bits and pieces of it." But I think, to your point, they did that to the exclusion of having anything new to say about it.
Yeah. I admire them for doing that. But even as somebody who loves all of the continuity of Star Trek, imagining an artist trying to create something new while having to read dissertations about something that they're not supposed to do, it just seems like a completely impossible task.
No, I know. And I mean, it was a big ask. And the fact that it made money, the fact that there was a huge blockbuster, is why these guys continue to get writing jobs. I mean, they nailed this one, at least in terms of money, and that's what you were talking about at the beginning. The three Kelvinverse movies have made more money than any of the other Star Trek movies, and so they're going to keep going to that well, because that's the answer to all of your questions is money.
Yeah. And of course, they went on to, write the Amazing Spider-Man 2. So obviously, their talent is not to be questioned.
I know. Yeah, you look at some of the other things that they wrote, the Transformers movies. Oh boy, I mean, like, yeah.
I forgot that they did The Island, and when I read that, I was like, you know what? This does feel like The Island. I think that the 2009 shares a lot of qualities with The Island. I can see that.
Right.
Not in terms of the plot.
No, I get you, but the feel of it. Yeah, the feel of it.
Yeah. Well, as we get to the end here, is there anything that you have left unsaid? Anything that we have to mention still about the Star Trek 2009?
Well, I got just a couple of quick things. The red matter is one of the things that comes up a lot, and fans hate the red matter, and I dislike the red matter. Red matter is absolutely a MacGuffin. What is it? Who knows? What does it do? It apparently stops a supernova with a black hole.
Yeah, or you can win the Powerball.
Why does Spock need to have 20 gallons of it when he's going to use a drop of it? You know,
I know. Why can a drop stop a supernova, but then just outside of the solar system they detonate an entire Powerball of it, and that's going to be fine?
Right? How was starting a black hole just outside of Romulus going to do them any favors? You know,
thanks.
There's a whole lot of stuff with this, but apparently a lot of fans have pointed out that in Alias, in like the first season of Alias, I don't know if you ever watched this show, but there was this. Did you ever watch Alias?
No.
Okay. So I watched it back in the day, and it's fun, but again, just like this movie, like if you think about it too long, it just all is completely bonkers. And there's some ancient artifacts that they're putting together, much like Fringe, again, another show that Abrams is associated with and was a part of. And but one of the devices is this thing that holds a little ball of red liquid and makes it hover. And like, this is an image, I guess, or a thing that he and Wurtzy and Kurtzman have been kicking around for a long time. And when they needed a MacGuffin to stop to destroy Vulcan with, then they came up with the red matter. To me, look, sure, hand wave the red matter. It's dumb. I don't care. The thing that bothers me more than that is the trans warp business with Scotty. Like, okay, so as a Trek fan and a person who has learned a lot of Treknobabble, both as to role play Star Trek, to write Star Trek, to enjoy Star Trek, I call BS, like total BS. Like I will give you red matter. That's how bad off I am. I will give you red matter, which is total BS as well. But I cannot give you Scotty beaming them from that planet onto the warp, onto the Enterprise, which is moving at warp somewhere else in the galaxy. I can't do it. If trans warp is a thing, I think you talked about this maybe in your motion picture podcast about how they seem to discover these new technologies and knowledge that they never ever use again. Right. If trans warp is a thing in Kirk's era, we don't need starships anymore. Like you could just beam people to other planets. It's preposterous.
Well, certainly it's useful for terrorists because Khan uses it to escape. Yeah.
Right. It's just the most inane thing. And like when they show up on the ship and Spock's like, tell me how you did this. And I'm like, they can't, Spock, because it's total BS. They can't tell you how it worked. That bothered me more than the red matter, which I know is a big deal to people. So the red matter is a big deal. The trans warp to me is a problem. I
was just mad that they killed Admiral Archer's dog. There's no way that was Porthos.
Okay, so no,
although we don't know how long dogs live in the future.
Right, it can't be Porthos, but he could have had another dog, I guess. But apparently, Abrams has said that on his last Star Trek movie, as they go out, what he'd love to be the last scene is that dog appearing on a transporter pad. So that would actually be a funny last gag to go out, because I had a writing professor at the University of Tennessee, where I went to school, who he was one of my favorite teachers ever. And one of his golden rules was, don't kill the dog. He said, no matter what you do, he said, you can kill 100 people in your story, but don't kill a dog, because the people hate it when you kill the dog, and everybody, like, we don't want to see a dead dog. So it's a funny gag that he lost the dog, and it's a funny reference to Enterprise in this movie. But they got to bring that dog back. I mean, it's still alive out there, like Scotty in the buffer. I mean, it's somewhere, right? It's somewhere. The last thing I'll add here is, and this again, I think gets back to one of the reasons I enjoy this movie so much. My wife and I sat down to watch this movie again over the weekend, and I was telling her this and that about it, and she said, I confess, I've seen this movie a couple, 3 times, and she said, I don't remember the plot at all. And she said, but I do remember the characters and the interplay between the characters. I mean, she obviously knows Kirk and Spock and everything. She's also a Trekkie, and so it's not like she's a casual Star Trek fan. She was watching TNG, recording them off television when we met, which was a very nice surprise for me. So So like she's been a Star Trek fan for a long time, but she said, I don't remember what this movie's about, but I do remember how good the characters are together. And I think that is the lasting legacy of this movie. I think that it is all about the great casting and the way that they wrote the spirit of these characters to live on in these actors.
Yeah. Which, is they have to, because of course the actors one by one are leaving us. And so we need to keep them alive.
Yeah.
Keep the characters alive. Well, now that we've reached the end of the show, I've got a question for you. Normally, you would get a promotion in our Starfleet, but this was a special assignment, and for your long service with the show, I think that you qualify as an admiral. Oh. And we all know that rank has its privileges, and every admiral has their little affectations. Maybe they've got a riding crop. Maybe they bring their beagle with them everywhere. What would be your admiral's affectation?
Oh, man. I think I would have a pizza buffet in our 10 forward. That would be my thing, is that there's always pizza available in our version of 10 forward, whatever our bar or cafeteria is, pizza bar. And I would like
the pizza chef travels with you everywhere.
Yeah, that's right. A pizza chef that travels with me. I also would like to hang a disco ball in engineering.
Oh yeah, that'd be nice. Sure, why not?
That would be my.
Can't tell. Is something going wrong, or is it just dance time?
Yeah. When the red alert goes off, man, it gets really great, groovy in there with the red
exciting.
Lights beaming everywhere. So pizza bar and disco balls. That would be my thing. And I have to give a shout out for the USS Farragut, which gets mentioned in this film, which of course in continuity, I believe, is the ship that Kirk was the captain of before the Enterprise. Is that right? I think so.
He served on it. I think he was the captain.
Maybe he was at least served on it. At least got it. Cut his teeth on that ship. I grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee, and Admiral Farragut, the actual Admiral Farragut, was born right near there. And I went to Farragut Intermediate and Farragut Primary when I was a kid. So I would choose, I think, as my flagship, the USS Farragut.
At this point, we'll get a Farragut series.
At this point, everything's on the table, and I maybe I've mentioned it on here before, but maybe now is the time to pitch my Grey's Anatomy Star Trek series, where it's an all medical ship. This is gold. We got to write it.
I just watched the DS9 episode, Nor the Battle to the Strong, for another podcast I'm doing, and we're ostensibly comparing it to one of its influences, Stephen Crane's The Red Badge of Courage.
Oh yeah,
but a huge part of the episode is Bashir, working in an ER setting and having this kind of like gallows humor, dark humor with the other attendants and doctors. So yeah, I could totally see that Grey's Anatomy ER type show,
or a MASH, MASH in there with it. Yeah, listen, they're throwing money at Star Trek shows. We got to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Work that up. Well, Admiral Gratz, thanks so much for joining me to talk about Star Trek and the Star Trek universe. And if people want to continue the conversation, and they can at EISTpod on Twitter and the Enterprising Individuals Facebook page, where can people find you online?
So you can find my website at alangratz.com, and it's ALANGRATZ. I'm also on Twitter under that name, and Instagram, reluctantly, under that name.
Reluctantly. Okay. And you can pre-order Alan's new novel, 2 Degrees, which comes out on October 4th. And also you can pre-order as well his original graphic novel, Captain America, The Ghost Army, due out May 2nd of next year.
Yeah, I think actually January. They've moved it up. January.
Oh, did they? Okay, yeah. Good.
Thank you for the plug, but I think January even. So sooner rather than later.
Yeah, so hurry up and get that. And thanks again, Alan, for joining me. We are signing off until the next mission. Hailing frequencies closed.